A man goes over a waterfall inside a steel barrel. Everyone watching assumes that's the end of him. He climbs out alive. Another man crosses the finish line of a horse race in first place. The crowd goes wild. The jockey on that horse was already dead. And one man's ending wasn't a war, or an assassination, or some monster in the dark. It was a very small object lying in the road. Today we're looking at the deaths that got written down in history books for one reason only. Nobody could believe how unlucky they were. These aren't tragedies in the usual sense. Nobody here was hunted down. Almost nobody here was even in danger. Most of them were doing something completely routine. Getting into a car, walking down a street, going to bed. They were just standing in the exact wrong spot, at the exact wrong second, next to the exact wrong ordinary object. And that was enough. A couple of them had already survived things that should have killed them, which somehow makes it worse. Isadora Duncan and the scarf. Isadora Duncan was an American dancer who got famous in the early 1900s. For the time, what she did on stage was genuinely shocking. No tight corsets, loose, flowing fabric instead. Bare feet on the stage floor. A body that moved however it felt like moving. Today, that sounds like a normal dance class. Back then, it was close to a scandal. And she had one object that people basically treated as part of her: a long silk scarf. On stage, off stage, in photographs, everywhere. The scarf finished the picture. If you were drawing Isadora Duncan from memory, you'd draw the scarf. September 14th, 1927, Nice, France. Duncan was heading out for an evening drive. Now, the car matters here, so picture it properly. It had no roof. And it was old enough that the wheels weren't tucked neatly inside the body panels the way they are on a modern car. The spokes were right there, out in the open, spinning in the air beside the passenger seat. A friend told her it was cold out and she should grab a coat. She took the scarf instead. And so far, this is nothing. A woman gets into a car wearing a scarf. That's it. That's the whole scene. But when she sat down, the long end of that scarf spilled over the side of the car, and the car pulled away. The end of the silk caught in the spokes of the rear wheel. That wheel was already turning fast, and silk is smooth, and there was nothing to stop it. The scarf wound into the axle in a fraction of a second. It pulled her neck with enormous force, dragged her out of the moving car, and threw her onto the road. According to the reports at the time, her neck was broken and she died almost instantly. There was no warning. There wasn't even a moment where she could have grabbed at it. The object that had made her recognizable for her entire career became, in about 1 second, the most dangerous thing she owned. Bobby Leach and the orange peel. Bobby Leach was not a man who avoided dangerous ideas. On July 25, 1911, the dangerous idea was Niagara Falls. And Niagara isn't just a nice view with a gift shop. It's an enormous volume of water slamming straight down, and underneath it, there's crushing impact, whirlpools, and rock. It's the kind of place where standing behind the railing still makes your stomach drop. Bobby Leach's plan was to climb inside a steel barrel and go over the edge in it. The drop is about 170 feet. He survived. Not in great shape, to be clear. Both kneecaps shattered, jaw fractured, months flat on his back in a hospital bed. But alive, which was, frankly, not the expected outcome. After he recovered, he did the obvious thing. He took the barrel on tour. He hauled that dented steel barrel around the world and told anyone who would sit still about the day he went over Niagara Falls and lived. The Man Who Beat the Falls. That one title kept audiences buying tickets for years. But the world is a strange place. Sometimes the person who walks away from the biggest danger imaginable gets taken out by the smallest one available. In 1926, Bobby Leach was walking down a street in New Zealand. No waterfall, no barrel, no crowd. A completely normal street on a completely normal day. And he stepped on an orange peel lying on the ground. He slipped, went down, and his leg broke. That should have been the end of the story, a broken leg and an embarrassing anecdote. Instead, the wound got infected. Gangrene set in. The leg had to be amputated, and the infection still didn't stop. Complications from it killed him. The man who survived Niagara Falls was finished off by a piece of fruit. Garbage. People still tell this story more than a century later, and it's entirely because of that gap. Millions of tons of falling water couldn't do it. A sidewalk could. Frank Hayes and Sweet Kiss. A racetrack is full of people with different jobs. People watching the horses, people betting on them, people feeding and training and cleaning up after them. And then the person actually up on the horse, the jockey. Frank Hayes was not a jockey. He worked in the stables. He looked after the horses, helped with training, got them ready for race day, and then watched somebody else ride them. But what he actually wanted was to be the one riding. And on June 4th, 1923, he finally got his shot. He was going to ride a horse called Sweet Kiss in a real race. The problem was weight. For a jockey, weight is everything. Every pound the horse doesn't have to carry is a pound it can spend on speed. So races set a limit, and riders have to hit it. To make that limit, Hayes had to drop more than 10 pounds in a single day. So he barely ate. He cut his water. He pushed his body hard in exactly the wrong direction, and he did it fast. Race day came, and he made the weight. There is no version of that story where his body is doing well. Sweet Kiss wasn't a favorite either. The odds sat around 20-1, which is the track's polite way of saying nobody expected a thing. Then the race started, and something odd began to happen. Sweet Kiss moved to the front. She held the lead through the final stretch, and she crossed the finish line first. A stable hand, in his first ever race on a horse nobody had backed, had just won. This is the part of the story where the music swells. But when people came over to congratulate him, the mood changed very fast. Hayes was slumped forward on the horse, and he wasn't moving. When they got to him, he was already dead. He'd had a heart attack during the race itself. His body simply never came out of the saddle. So the horse kept running, kept its lead, and won. Which makes Frank Hayes one of the only jockeys in history to win a race after dying in it. First race, last race, same race. The horse's name was Sweet Kiss. Afterward, people started calling her the Sweet Kiss of Death. Francois Vatel and the Fish. 1671, France. An enormous banquet was being prepared for King Louis XIV. Around 3,000 guests. The king's dignity, the nobility watching each other, the host's reputation, and the pride of the entire French court were all riding on this one event. The man in charge of all of it was Francois Vatel. And he wasn't just the cook.
Food, service, entertainment, atmosphere, timing, the flow of the whole event. All of it was his job. Think less head chef, more the person running the entire production.
Littell barely slept while putting it together. Then the event started, and things immediately started going wrong. More guests turned up than expected, and some tables ran short on meat. That night, fog rolled in and ruined the fireworks. Now, taken individually, these are fixable problems. Annoying, survivable. The sort of thing that gets laughed about a week later. To a man who hasn't slept in days and has the King of France in the next room, they don't look fixable at all. They look like a pattern. And the next day was Friday. In Catholic France at that time, Friday meant no meat. You served fish. That wasn't a preference, it was a rule, and the king's table was not the place to break it. So Vattel got up at 4 in the morning to check the fish delivery. What arrived was nowhere near enough. So he asked the supplier a simple question. Is this all of it? The supplier was thinking about his own cart, his own delivery, the only one he knew about. He said yes. Vattel understood it as the entire shipment, everything that was coming, for 3,000 people already sitting in front of him. And in that moment, the whole banquet collapsed inside his head. No fish. The event falls apart in front of the king. His reputation, built over an entire career, gone by lunchtime. He went back to his room and stabbed himself. A few minutes later, fish started arriving from the other ports. Cart after cart of it. There was more than enough. There had always been enough. The banquet went ahead exactly as planned, and the guests ate fish. The problem was never that the fish didn't exist. The problem was that the information arrived a few minutes late. It gets remembered as one of the most tragic misunderstandings in history, and that's genuinely all it was. A misunderstanding, delivered with the worst timing imaginable. Antoni Gaudí and the city that didn't know him. When people picture Barcelona, a lot of them picture the Sagrada Familia, that strange, beautiful, still unfinished cathedral. The building that looks like somebody grew a forest out of stone. The man who designed it was Antoni Gaudí. Gaudí didn't just put up a famous building. He changed the face of an entire city, and Barcelona still looks like him today. But the way his life ended had almost nothing to do with any of that. June 7th, 1926. Gaudí, 73 years old, was crossing a street in Barcelona. A tram hit him. He went down and lost consciousness. And this is where the story stops being about a traffic accident. Because what mattered next wasn't the injury. It was what people saw when they looked down at him. Gaudí dressed very plainly. He always had. Old, worn clothes. No effort spent on looking presentable. And that day, no identification on him at all. So the people who gathered around looked at an unconscious old man in shabby clothes lying in the street, and the thought, famous architect, did not occur to a single one of them. They saw a poor old man who'd been hit by a tram. Someone tried to flag down a taxi to get him to a hospital, and by most accounts, several drivers didn't want him in their car. He ended up not at a good hospital, but at a charity hospital for the poor. It took an entire day before a priest from a nearby church looked at his face and recognized him. That's when everyone finally worked out who had been lying in that ward all night. The genius architect of Barcelona. The man whose cathedral was standing half-built a few streets away. By then it was far too late. Gaudí died 3 days after the accident. The man who spent his whole life changing what a city looked like ended up being the one person in it that nobody could recognize. João Maria de Souza and the Cow. 2013, in the Caratinga region of Brazil. A 45-year-old man named João Maria de Souza was asleep at home with his wife. The house sat at the bottom of a hill, in an area where cattle wandered around loose. That night, a cow, a full-grown one, close to a ton, was walking along the hillside above the house. And so far, this is just a quiet night in the countryside. Nothing here is a story yet. The problem was the geometry. The hill met the house right at roof level, and the cow walked onto the roof. The roof did not hold. The cow came straight down through the ceiling and into the bedroom. And out of every square foot of floor in that room, it landed on the bed where João was sleeping. His wife wasn't hurt. The cow, according to the reports, walked away basically fine. That's the part that gets you. Of the 3 living things involved in a cow falling through a ceiling, the cow came out of it best. But João took the full weight of it, and the damage was internal. From the outside, he didn't look like a man who was about to die. There was no obvious catastrophic injury. Inside, he was bleeding, and he died the next day. And here's the detail that makes this one land even harder. According to local reporting at the time, this wasn't even the first time a cow had come through a roof in that area.
There is no precaution for this. There is no safety habit that covers a ceiling turning into a cow at 2 in the morning. Which is exactly why this case still gets brought up as one of the most absurd pieces of bad luck ever recorded. Archduchess Mathilde and the cigarette. 1867, Austria. Archduchess Mathilde was getting ready to go to the theater. She was 18 years old, and she was engaged to the Crown Prince of Italy. Royalty, a wedding on the way, a night out at the theater, an expensive dress. On paper, this is about as elegant as a scene gets. That evening, Mathilde was wearing a long gauze dress, light, thin fabric. The kind that catches air and moves when you move. It's the sort of dress that exists to look weightless, and it was doing its job. And while she was waiting to leave, she was smoking a cigarette. The problem was that her father had banned smoking, and he had banned it strictly. So she wasn't standing there enjoying it. She was standing there getting away with it. Then she heard him coming. Mathilde panicked. And this is the most ordinary feeling in this entire video. An 18-year-old hearing a parent's footsteps in the hallway and needing the evidence gone in under a second. Everybody watching this has had some version of that half second. So she hid the cigarette behind her back. It's the obvious move. It's where your hand goes without asking you first. But what she was holding wasn't a cigarette she'd put out. It was still lit. The ember touched the thin gauze of the dress. And that fabric had no interest in resisting. It went up instantly. The fire spread across her back, up her arms, to her neck and her legs, and the burns were severe. She died about 2 weeks later. There was no conspiracy here. No war, no assassin, no enemy of the crown. It started with a teenager not wanting her father to catch her smoking. Richard Versal and the line about living too long. Opera is a dramatic art form by design. People fall in love and collapse. They drink poison. They scream for revenge. They sing long, beautiful, technically impressive songs while allegedly dying of something. So when somebody on that stage suddenly goes down, the audience can genuinely be unsure for a moment. That's not stupidity. That's just the art form working as intended. On January 5th, 1996, that exact ambiguity played out at the Metropolitan Opera in New York. The tenor Richard Versal was performing, and the opera he was performing in was about the secret to eternal life. Versal was up on a tall ladder on the stage, singing, which is worth pausing on for a second. Opera singers aren't just singing.
They're doing it while climbing things, wearing heavy costumes, and projecting to the back of a very large room without a microphone. It's physical work, and he was doing it several feet up in the air. And in that scene, he sang a line that meant this: "You can only live so long." And immediately after singing it, he had a heart attack. Versal fell from the ladder and landed on the stage below. At first, the audience assumed it was part of the show, because in opera, when a person drops, you genuinely cannot always tell in the moment whether that was written down in the score. This time, it wasn't. He died before he reached the hospital. The reason this one lodged itself in people's memory is entirely the timing. In an opera about living forever, seconds after singing that a person can only live so long, that is exactly what happened. Prince Philippe and the Pig. You'd assume a medieval French prince lived a dangerous life. War, assassination, political knife fighting, endless fights over who inherits what. And all of those dangers were completely real. But the thing that actually decided Prince Philippe's fate was none of them. 1131, France. Philippe was the son of King Louis VI. He was 15 years old, and he'd already been crowned. His father was still king, and Philippe had been made king alongside him, so the succession was locked in early. He was very likely to end up running the country. That day he was riding a horse through the streets of Paris, and medieval Paris was not a tidy place. Forget the version in your head with the wide boulevards and the cafes. That Paris is centuries away. This Paris had narrow streets full of people and carts and animals and piles of refuse that nobody was in any particular hurry to move. Livestock wandered through it the same way pigeons wander through a city now. It was normal. Nobody thought about it. And then a pig came bolting out from the side of the road. It ran between the horse's legs, and the horse lost its balance. Philippe was thrown forward off the horse and hit his head on the ground. Bones broke throughout his body, and he never regained consciousness. He died the next day. Not on a battlefield, not in a palace coup, not by poison at dinner. The heir to the French throne was taken out by a pig in the road. The story goes that after this, Paris brought in rules against letting pigs run loose in the streets. A city safety measure that arrived exactly one dead prince too late. Franz Ferdinand and the wrong turn. This last one didn't stop at ruining one person's luck. It ended up bending the direction of world history. June 28, 1914. Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary was visiting Sarajevo with his wife Sophie. Assassins were positioned along the route, waiting. The first attempt failed. One of them threw a bomb, but it missed the Archduke's car and went off underneath the car behind him. The motorcade accelerated away, and the rest of the assassins never got their moment. Under normal storytelling rules, this is where it ends. The assassination failed. Security tightens. Everybody goes home and it becomes a footnote. But Franz Ferdinand said he wanted to go to the hospital and visit the people who'd been wounded in the blast. And then, the real problem turned out to be the route. The driver didn't know the city well, and he turned down the wrong street. Realizing the mistake, he stopped the car to reverse and turn around. And standing directly in front of where that car came to a stop was Gavrilo Princip, one of the assassins whose attempt had already failed earlier that same morning. Princip pulled out a pistol and shot both of them. Franz Ferdinand was hit in the neck. Sophie was hit in the abdomen. Sophie died first, and Franz Ferdinand died not long after. About 5 weeks later, the First World War began. Now, the causes of that war were far more complicated than one street corner. Tension across Europe, tangled alliances, imperialism, nationalism, all of it had been stacking up for a long time before anyone drove into Sarajevo. But the fact that one of the final triggers was a driver taking a wrong turn is still hard to sit with. If that car had gone down one different alley, the century might have gone a different way. Every story today had the same shape underneath it. Death doesn't always arrive looking like a big dramatic event with warning signs attached. A scarf, an orange peel, a fish delivery, a cigarette, a pig. One wrong turn. Completely ordinary things, showing up at exactly the wrong second, and ending up written into history books because nobody could believe it. If you made it all the way through this video without stepping on anything, subscribe. Statistically, you're already doing better than most of the people in it.